Fellow Rebels, here in the dungeon with me today is another member of the OG Rebellion. She is a chief, a Nyx, an agent of Helheim, the adopted daughter of the king himself. She has wowed us with her artwork, cosplays, and devious plot lines alike. And doubtless without her, the story of more than one Battle of the Grounded Dungeon simply wouldn't be the same. People of the Grounded Dungeon, I give you Akkey. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Hi.
Yes, and thank you for joining me here in my cell. So, usually with the podcast, the thing I start out with first is, how did everything start with for you in BotGD? What is your discovery story with your main character or characters, how it happened in real life, and just your thoughts on that whole first moment where it blew up?
Well, I got the same, well, not the same, I guess, but I got the math asked from Haddock that one night about having that, massive joke play on Felt, and I just jumped on board. I was already dungeons myself from, other sad How to Train Your Dragon comics.
What? You would do something sad and get thrown in the dungeon? I'm honestly shocked. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I've been doing that before, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
So I was already on, Haddock's list to, message about that, and I was just, totally on board because it's really interesting. And, I haven't done anything like that before, so I was just like, yeah, absolutely. I didn't know what was going to happen. Wasn't expecting it to, blow up like that. I don't think anybody would.
Yes, so far one of the most consistent things, just talking with people and doing this series, is that no one ever thought it was going to happen this way. None. There wasn't even a suspicion. And honestly, if someone ever said that they did suspect it would turn into something like this, I'd probably call them a liar.
Yeah. Because, I remember at one point, people were already, making side roleplay blogs, and I was like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna be on this for too long. We are.
Mm-hmm. And how many side blogs do you have now? Just out of curiosity?
Oh, I actually deleted everything.
Oh, you cheated.
I still have my main, and then... No, actually, I don't think I have my main. No, I still have my main, sorry. I don't have my roleplay blog as a side blog on my main. It's on a completely different... Because I wanted to have a different set of following.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess Akkey Agent of Helheim is the main. And then I have a side blog for the old name Chief Akkey of Stonegit. So I changed it, Agent of Helheim, and then that's it.
And if I remember, that was... Oh, go ahead. Well, sorry, what were you saying? I interrupted.
Oh no, it was just like I said, it didn't exist until a good role play. So if somebody wanted to really peruse my archive, the really first the posts might still be on my main, my actual.
Yeah, the first Akkey Rumi main.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. When you mentioned that you destroyed a bunch of side blogs, all I could think of was some of my trips into the archives to try to recover hidden replies, and then having those blogs being deleted.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it to myself. It's like, okay, so Akkey had a lot of side blogs and did a lot of shit with all those side blogs, and then as we're putting together the wiki, she deletes them.
No, it's not those ones. The ones that I deleted are my old ask, the old trends in Tumblr where you ask this person something and then they reply in character kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
I deleted those, yeah.
Gotcha.
But I still have my main where I did my roleplay stuff, but I'm pretty sure some of those were deleted too.
Okay, you're both making a strong and destroying. You're making a strong case for yourself and destroying it as you do so. But that's okay, because we have a lot of other things to cover, and we don't necessarily have to get into the details of how it might be a tremendous nightmare trying to recover certain hidden material on account of you deleting everything.
Sorry.
Just saying. Alright, so now you already answered it. The second question is technically, did you ever imagine, oh, I know this is different. I should really read my own material before jumping into these podcasts. So of course no one imagined... Huh?
You're taking the lead here. I don't know anything.
That's fine. So obviously no one expected it to be as big as it was, but did you ever imagine that you would end up where you did in the story and within the group? And if not, what did you think would happen? Because where we have Akkey right now is she's an agent of the goddess of hell, the adopted daughter of the king, prior to him being deceased in BotGD 2, and all around just like an absolute staple, smack dab in the middle of the rebellion, while at the same time kind of serving as a voluntary outsider to the whole thing despite that. So, given everything and how you're here in the Discord chat with us 5 years later, is this anything that you were thinking or planning or hoping for at all? And what was the alternative if this wasn't it?
It was a little bit of both, of me planning and not, I guess. The way I work is, when I have something, I'll plan to a certain point, just so I have a structure, but if I want to, I'll completely destroy all of that, and not follow it, like what I've been doing with a couple of muses right now.
Yes.
Which is why I guess, like, there's that sense of in it, but also not, because I'm totally go with the flow. Like, if this is what's happening, there's something that I can contribute to it, then I totally will. It's, either way, anyway, for me. And part of it was also, like, I think it was the same as, I remember you said it before, where at some point, the reason why you made Stonegit was so that, like, there, and that he wouldn't hear kind of thing?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, originally as soon as the opportunity came for Stonegit to offer to be a guard to Haddock, I grabbed onto it with both hands and sunk my nails into it, because I knew that was my opportunity of, no matter how small of a role I would play, there would at least be a role and something I could claim to.
Yeah, so it was something like that. Like, there's something that I want to do at some point, like, try to kill half of the rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I and then
Wait. When did you try to kill half the rebellion? Because I know Kiri tried to kill half of the rebellion, and I don't know who else, but when were you planning it?
It was one of those side things where it was just casual how much of the rebellion actually suffered. Well,
Oh yeah, and you like threw like the number like 500 out there or something like that, and we're like, excuse me, what?
I wanted to put half. I wanted to put half, and then she was like, "No, we're not doing half. We're doing a third. That is what I'll give you." And I was like, "Okay, Mom."
Right, because I think a third is what had happened in the original threads back in season 4 with the witch attack. It took out a third of them.
Yeah. It was supposed to be a half, but I guess it's just...
That's still a lot of people, but
Yeah, so it was like a compromise.
It's like, I want to kill more. Good for you.
But yeah, that was basically like everything that I would do is like, this looks like an opportunity. I'm gonna put that in. Hey, this looks like I did that. I'm gonna put that in.
So you heard it here, folks. I found a job title and was like, aha, this is how I'll put myself in the RP permanently. And Akkey looked in the same situation and said, I'll do the same thing, only it's going to be killing half of the rebellion.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Oh my goodness. That was not an answer I was expecting, but then again, there it is. And this is why I ask everyone the same questions, because every once in a while, a new answer that I really wasn't expecting to come around the corner suddenly shows up. So when it first happened, BotGD blew up, and everyone realized that it was going to survive for more than just a week or two. And the finale occurs where where like in rapid succession, you throw someone into hell, you lose all of your memories, and the next thing that's happening to you is a Valkyrie is just fucking your character up beyond measure. And I'm pretty sure it's around that time when Season 2 kicked around, everyone was like, oh wow, this is not only here for the long run, but it's also critically important to me, as I've suddenly realized. IRL, how was all that for you?
Well, all of that was I was in school, and it was a weird balance of going to school, going to work, and then coming back home and refreshing everything and trying to catch up.
Yeah. I know that one.
That was it. But also, because I remember throwing out the option of killing Akkey every now and then. It was amazing.
As you do.
Get out of it? Yeah. It's because that's how you usually get out of a series. You don't want your character to be there anymore, right?
Yeah, I know a handful of people who were exactly in that spot as well, because no one was sure.
Yeah. So it was me trying to figure out, do I want to continue or do I not want to continue? But in the end, I was always just gravitating towards it because I was curious. I was like, where the heck is this going to go? So I was just okay, I'm for the long run, I suppose.
And here you are, 5 years later, stirring up even more trouble.
No.
Yes.
No.
No. Listen, I had to give Tree a really hard time stabbing Vox, okay? And then stabbing Haddock. And trust me, if I get Haddock on this podcast, he will get trouble for coming up with the idea of stabbing Haddock too. However, I'm pretty sure out of all the characters going through the ringers, your character got rattled one of the worst in the series. And not so much because of there were definitely moments where someone suffered something more visceral or something that left more blatant scars, and other things that left something more subtle. But I've noticed with Akkey and everything that happened with her and Hemlock, it has been the most hard-to-shake psychological scar that has been inflicted on the character. Even Haddock pulled himself up, metaphorically speaking, after he was paralyzed. Stonegit eventually came to terms with his past, which wasn't anything like what Hemlock did, and then doubly so is on the verge of fully coming to terms with what happened between him and Orskov at the end of Season 3. But Akkey has been the one who's had the hardest time shaking the traumatic event of Hemlock, mostly because the episodes are still there. There's a certain sense none of it has gotten easier, even though it's been decades, and that's been very interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's the way I worked the entire RP is literally putting a problem in first and then trying to find a solution for it after.
Right.
Yeah, that's how I've been kind of like plotting everything. I'm pretty sure. I think like it works that way. But yeah. But so that's when the hemlock thing happened, and then when it finished, I was kind of like, okay, that's clean. It's a clean cut, but what are the after effects of it?
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of started morphing into like a reflection of mental issues and that psychological things and all of that. And I remember like I would read like experiences and all about like how it's not really like one of those uphill battles and then it all gets better. It's a lot of constant up and down, constant battles every day kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I felt like this is what would be happening to her. So like in the beginning of like BotGD 2, I remember like our being Akkey like really happy and all that, and I was like having a good time with it and all that. I remember like putting that in the Discord, like I was having a really good time finally role playing her like okay, but at the same time I felt like it wasn't quite right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. I get that feeling. Go ahead.
It was just something like I always felt like they're never really gone. That freaking line that I keep typing in the one shot. That's exactly what I felt like with Akkey. Like whenever I write her and her struggles, they're always at the back of her mind.
Yeah. And I think it's a good, there's two kinds of stories. There's the story of overcoming, and there's also but there's different ways that people overcome stuff. And I think Akkey's is an interesting demonstration of how struggles can persist over a long time, and how you can still lead a good life, even with this thing that you still have to deal with that is also incredibly severe at times as well. It's like it's no light matter. But Akkey has clearly been soldiering on in spite of everything. And I guess out of a matter of personal curiosity, just because you and I have done so much role-playing with so many different character dynamics in both the Meridoc and the Stonegit universe, I guess the question is Akkey happy? Like, after all of this, even with her still dealing with it, would she consider her life a good one?
Yeah. Ultimately, like, the end for her that I've always imagined is the one, and just a satisfied one. Like, I remember, like, writing that I wanted her to die.
Mm-hmm.
Just to make it, like, peaceful and happy for her. And, like, I would think that she, despite her.
You would think that she what?
That she would think it was a good life, despite everything.
That's good. That's very encouraging to hear. And I know that I had to share two experiences with some of the things you talked about. One was the making the plan and not really knowing where it's going. I don't think I'm as open-ended as you and Tree are, especially more in recent days. Because usually what I have is I have something to introduce someone and a plot, and then a ending scene. Like, not necessarily a whole ending scenario, but a lot of times just an ending scene where anything in the middle can happen and influence and adjust how that ending scene comes out, but ultimately there is a sticking point. So, but at the same time, I commend and I absolutely love the approach you and Tree take, where it's that same thing, only even more flexible, where there's even more open-ended possibilities, because that's always been a staple of what BotGD has been. That's how all of us went in and started, and I think it's great that some, if not a lot of us, are continuing that very honest trait of not knowing what we're doing, but here we go for the ride anyway. While still having some plot integrity, because otherwise we get the beautiful thing, which was Season 1.
Season 1.
I have pulled up Season 1 threads for record keeping, where there is a whole link for 3 sentences that don't go anywhere.
Like, I personally haven't read one in a long, long time. Like, I fondly remember it, and I can remember lines that I've written, but also I can't take to read it myself because I'm cringing at my own self because I'm like, what's happening? What were we thinking?
Yep. Oh my god.
Great.
Yep.
It's also good.
Yep. It was one of those things where I get it. I get that same thing, except I would read stuff Stonegit would do and say in Season 1, and I'd feel awkward about it, and that started to taper off around Season 4. Which because it was that thing where everyone was, and again, it's the great thing about it. Let's make no mistake. That's the great thing about it.
Yeah.
Everyone was responding emotionally, with no filters, with complete freedom. And that's where you get the strongest core sense of character that is there. And so, even though so much of Season 1 is cringy, it's why it's still beautiful. And then it's also beautiful that Tree has made the fanfiction, which has that same core feeling everyone has, just with enough slight dialogue modifications that the writers don't want to slam their own head in a car door. Or, subsequently, keep the attention of new readers.
Yeah.
But I totally get that. And the other point that you mentioned was, let's see what it was, because you brought up a second one and I had to go down a rabbit hole. It was not knowing where we were going. It was how fun Season 1 is to reread. Honestly, it's like riding a roller coaster where sections of it have been clearly cut out, but they're pretty sure it's going to run anyway. And the last one was... Damn it. What was it? Yeah, okay, yeah, I remember now. Hello, welcome back. Where you talked about how you role-played Akkey happy for a while, and then you realized that something wasn't quite right. There was that little niche in your writer's heart that was like, something's amiss here. I empathize with that hardcore, because that was like most of Stonegit's story arc in the early days, where he would get somewhere in his train wreck of a relationship with Haddock, he'd get somewhere positive, and I would try to write him happy, only to realize that there was still so much more to do and so far yet to go before anything actually truly settled out. And that was very challenging and frustrating, because I just wanted my muse to be happy for a change. And yet, there was this obstacle, but it paid off, because when it got to the end of the story, at least for them, everything there was authentic. And that's what I like about Akkey, because wherever she's going, it's going to be really real once she gets to the end of it.
And I think part of it was also because of the time skip. From 1 to there was that 25 year time skip, right? And that's a huge jump. And so, like, I've been personally shooting out those one-shots, right? Like, Steps Forward, One Step Back, that one-shot series, and all those other things, plus the Blackie stuff. And, like, it helps fill the gaps that I have in my mind, but also, it also just kind of shows that there was so much done, and there's so much more to.
Yes. And I love this the cyclical nature of the Blackie and the non-Blackie universe, because essentially the stories are the same, where there's still that level of connection and bond between Blunt and Akkey, only obviously one is romantic and one is platonic. But I like how there's a universe that is that similar, and yet there's just that core detail that's so different. But it's still at the point where even if the characters, let's say, swapped universes, almost the only thing that they would be confused about is the existence of that relationship, and every other feeling, every other shared history or memory would essentially be the same. And I think that's pretty cool. Well, I got another question, and so I just, just for clarification, because a lot of this comes in from people being unsure. Like when we get new role players, they're unsure if the way they've made their character is right. And so with this, for one thing, it's nice to get everyone's perspective, but it's also nice because that way, when new role players can hear this, it's like, yo, a lot of us wrote these characters on the back of a napkin and ran home to type it up on the computer, and that's as far as it got. So it's like, hit us with your best shot. And so I always like to hear what everyone's best shot was at the start of BotGD, and that is what inspired your character and what eventually motivated them into being who they are and taking the actions that they took.
That was complicated on my end.
That's fine. We got time.
I think it's like somewhat of a consensus that everybody's main to a certain has been himself, correct?
Yes, and that's another reason to put this in, to show that to people. It's like most people have run self-inserts, and if they're not a pure self-insert, they're derived from a personality trait of the writer. So another reason to feel good about just what you're doing.
So it was a little bit of just like reality and idealism, I guess, in a sense. So like, I guess we can start with like physical stuff, her physical appearance. A lot of like, she's 5 feet. I'm saying that she's 5 feet. She's my height,
right?
So I can see everything literally from her eyes, etc.
Yep.
But also, I want white hair. I want green eyes, and I like scars, and I want to jump around like that, and like it's stuff like that. So like, I would put character traits that I kind of want to do, but I just can't because IRL versus URL kind of thing.
Right.
And then everything else after like the main establishment of Haddock giving her the chief position and everybody calling her Akkey for some reason because it was my URL, so the name stuck, and that was Akkey's adopted daughter kind of thing. After all of that like initial stuff, it was just playing it like definitely playing like, because I remember when the stranger, the hooded stranger, which was pitch black, right?
Exactly.
The hooded stranger came along and all that. I think I was the one who was sold the most at that point. And then I remember at one point she was like, I don't know where to take this after threatening Haddock and all that extra stuff. She was like, I don't know where to take this. What do I do? And I was like, what if, let's do this.
Oh, it was your idea. So it wasn't Soul, it was you.
It was both of us.
I am noticing a pattern.
It was both of us in a sense because there was an underlying, the word love was brought out, how the stranger loved Akkey in a sense, but both of us were kind of agreeing that it wasn't romantic. So at that point we were like, damn, it's a family. So we were like, okay, father disappeared, went away, she was abandoned, and then from there actually stemmed her family of everybody dying.
Yeah. And I love, and this is another reason I love this. Those are the little bits of information and those little insider information stories that really make the experience even better, knowing that you and Soul had that moment of plotting and where the idea came from. And just like, because there were so many asks where someone just said something random in an ask at one point in Season 1 of BotGD that we have faithfully kept to this day.
Yeah.
Like, he loves Akkey. That could have been omitted really easily, but instead you took it and ran with it.
Yeah, I think that's like my main strategy in the entire roleplay. You give me something and I will run with it.
Hey,
That is what happened.
We did it with Blackie. I remember, I think I sent you a message years ago saying, alright, it's like I didn't make Blunt for this purpose, but, here we go, true to form BotGD, I think Blunt is crushing on Akkey. Any thoughts? And you were like, oh, yeah, I could see that works. And then we didn't do anything with it. And it was just, alright, cool, that happened. And then, years later, we run the whole Blackie thread, and now it's integrated into the main storyline. Which, again, no one could have guessed that.
Thank you, Venus!
Thank you, Akkey. It was a blast.
A lot of Akkey very improvised. I see something and then I get inspired by it and then run with it.
And that is definitely the way it ought to be. And on the note of those parallel universes and weighing it with the relationships, what are some of the relationship dynamics with other muses that your character has that are just, in your opinion, fun to talk about, but both the good, the bad, the intriguing, etc.?
Aside from Blackie.
No, you're allowed to talk about Blackie too. It's just that I figured I'd put it out there that other relationships could be mentioned as well. No, if you want to open with Blackie, go right ahead.
I don't know, they're just really cute. At its core, they're just so cute.
And that,
I draw them and then I'm just like
and you sucked in not just a new Battle of the Grounded Dungeon fan, but a Battle of the Grounded Dungeon AU fan, which is nuts and hysterical.
She's a friend. So ever since the beginning, I would bring up the roleplay with my friends, and they'd be just kind of like somewhat pleasantly curious, but never kind of read into it.
Mm-hmm.
But then one friend, Amy, she's a Tumblr addict.
Mm-hmm.
She's like a lot of us. Like, if she was a fan of How to Train Your Dragon, she would probably be part of BOT.
Ooh.
Yeah, if she was a dragon. But when I told her that we're doing the Blackie storyline, she was intrigued by it, and then so I started showing her like parts of the first links of like Blunt going to Iris and all that, and just that entire thing, that entire first thread. And she started getting invested in it. She started getting hooked into it because to her it's maybe people that she doesn't know,
mm-hmm.
or a universe that she doesn't know, but to her it's a romantic storyline. It makes her feel warm inside and all that like fangirly stuff. So,
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's why she likes it.
And
yeah.
I've noticed like with the Akkey and Blunt thing, they are incredibly shippable just because of the polarizing dynamics. Cause he's like an oak tree. He's fucking tall. And Akkey's just not. And then he is an absolute... Okay, starting out, he's an absolute scumbucket. And then finds some way to hide it the entire time, long enough for him to realize that he might want to do something honest for the first time in his life. Where, as Akkey has always been someone who's incredibly straightforward and also raw. Like, her and her emotions are the way that they are. She feels the way she feels, she acts the way she feels, Whereas Blunt can't get out of his own head to act authentically, literally if his life depended on it. Because if his life depended on it, he would just put up an act that would be the most convincing thing that would save his life. So, seeing two characters like that, both physically and mentally different like that, I think added a lot to the intrigue of their relationship, both in platonic and romantic.
Yeah. It's taking that opposite attract thing to like a completely new level.
Yes. The other thing with Blackie, and honestly, I could have just about shot myself in the foot when I realized that Blunt liked Akkey, because of how I knew things were actually going to go, and how in many narrative and character authenticity-wise how it would go, I realized that, once again, there were two characters who developed an attraction, if not fallen in love with each other, authentically without any planning in the story, and then true to form, it then does not work out.
Yeah.
Cause it goes back to like season 1 stuff, where there was the message where it's like, hey Haddock, how's your wife? And Haddock's like, Haddock doesn't, oh wait, yeah, Haddock has a wife, sure. And then like 3 days later, Stonegit kicks up.
Was that what happened? I don't remember that.
What, you didn't know that?
What? I don't remember that.
Yeah, oh, you remember that. Yeah, cause...
No, I don't remember
Oh,
that.
you don't? Okay,
that.
No, for real, that's what happened. Someone, an anonymous person, it might have been Sol for all I know, but I'm not sure, asked Haddock if he would be able to protect his wife and kids, and Haddock just responds, as Haddock does, and is like, oh, so Haddock has wife and kids. And like 3 days later, the melting the frozen heart thing happened. I realized that Stonegit liked Haddock, and I was like, oh, well, whatever. He's got a wife, so I can just move on. Like, I can play the part of the love lost and then move on. But then, it turns right back around, and I remember in the middle of a chat, I was thinking, alright, this is it. This is where Stonegit's like, okay, he's married, he loves his wife, I'm not gonna stoop to a low level, so I'll just, be blind somewhere else. And instead, Haddock puts in the reply where Haddock kisses Stonegit.
Yeah, I remember this now. Nope, I remember this. I know who sent that ask.
And that, yep, who sent that ask?
It was Sol.
It was Sol. Kind of figured it was Sol. Thank you, Sol.
Yes, it was.
But that one moment between Haddock's non-communication and Stonegit feeling scorned was the defining conflict that plagued their relationship for, what was it? 3 fucking seasons. 3 of them. And then so, fast forward, I'm like, Blunt likes Akkey. Except the whole point of Blunt being there, outside of being a fun character dynamic, was so that he and Stonegit could set something up after the shambles of what happened to both of their families and the world and yada yada yada. And he does like him, but it was scripted like him, and now he likes Akkey in non-scripted Akkey, and like I said, I felt like shooting myself in the foot. I'm like, I can't believe this has happened again.
What were you thinking for that one, though? Like, how did you decide to...
Like, how did Blunt come to the conclusion?
Yeah.
Well, it was It was... Well, so for one thing, I fully meant for Blunt to sweep into the rebellion and to get everyone wanting to ship him just so that they could figure out that he was a piece of crap. Who he was always going to be redeemable, but, and that worked. He got there, and 2 days later, I was doing threads with 3 female characters. And it ended with nearly all of them punching him. Or some variation. The plan worked perfectly. And so, but the problem is that he would flirt with Akkey, and she'd be like, ha, yeah, right. But then later, certain comments, certain ways that Akkey responded to Blunt, and certain ways that you described her thought process, began to kind of like click dots together, where Blunt started to think that maybe she liked him, and not for just all the normal, he's a guy with long hair and he's tall and he's strong and yada yada yada, but there was something that she actually liked. And that's not something Blunt was used to, and that's something that immediately caused a draw of, wait a minute, someone likes me for just some reason instead of it me being all handsome and whatnot. And so there'd be moments where he would hold her hands and you would go out of your way to type about how it made her feel warm. Or he would make a comment about how he was trying to woo Stonegit, and she'd get really quiet and mutter that he was an idiot or something like that. There would be moments like that slowly cultivated to him at the end realizing, oh shoot, I like her too. Now what do I do? Which is why I really wanted to make that thread where he essentially says that, because even though I planned for him and Stonegit to get together at the end, I didn't plan for them to start a relationship at the end of the series, because then it's like everyone wins and everyone gets with their romantic partner. It doesn't work that way. I wanted to be more like the world ended, they rebuilt, and very slowly the two entered into a relationship and started a life together. And so that was already set in stone, which made the perfect opening for me to address how the character then had feelings for Akkey and trying to figure out what the heck he was going to do, because he realized he liked two people and actually liked them and not just fancied them. But yeah, that's how that whole fiasco happened. The perpetual... Yes, you laugh. It's happened twice, and I'm just kind of sitting here going, it won't happen a third time, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if it did. This is incredibly unfair. What was that?
I'm so glad that it did.
It did, and right, and what made it even better is because the Blackie AU happened, then the Blackie AU got tied into the traditional AU, which means that not only Blackie has been made canon in the story in its own universe, but so has Stonedock. And I am still wanting to do a thread where Akkey connects the dots while Stonegit is in the premises, just so that she can have a nice jaw drop moment. So there was
Golden Timeline. Akkey is also going to have to make the dots.
Yes. A Blackie AU where they're both young and in the rebellion, and she realizes it, because there's I don't think there'd be anything more hysterical than her just looking at him standing guard and suddenly going, oh my god, wait a minute. And then similarly, a Golden Timeline where she's 45 and oh shit, I really should have seen that coming.
God.
So are there any other characters that Akkey has a particularly interesting dynamic with that you want to talk about? No is an okay answer, by the way, because we can do episode 2 anytime you want.
I've always also kind of liked the idea of a Kendall.
Mm-hmm.
Akkey, that was a really soft ship for me.
Really? Because I knew it was a soft ship on Findle's side, but I actually haven't had your take on it.
It was, to me, it was, from my perspective, from a Mun's perspective, it was, to me, it was always just really soft, really kind of pure thing.
Mm-hmm.
But also, as the Mun, I knew that it wasn't going to work out.
Right.
That's why there's always been that stop to it, because I, the Mun, don't want to hurt Findle's feelings.
Oh, that's so terrible and yet so sweet. So Fiendle and I,
So
welcome to the boat, Fiendle. Like,
yeah, that's why all of the choices that Muse Akkey was making is also kind of affected by Moon Akkey's choice.
right, of course, there's always that correlation.
Yeah. But like, yeah, I always thought that they'd be really together, or maybe like if this happened in modern, to like play out, I would have probably dated in a couple of years or a few years and kind of like probably the way kind of thing. But I don't think it works.
And that's and that can make an interesting dynamic in of itself. Also, I just realized that a fan has stopped blowing just now that has been blowing, and so I swear to hell, if I pull up this recording and it's garbage because of that, I'm gonna be mad. Anyway, proceed.
Where was I?
It
was one of those just what if kind of thing. Like I'm sitting down drawing some shit, or drawing some stuff, and I just go, oh, it would have been really cute if this happened, but I don't doubt so. But it's just kind of also because that in itself is very soft.
Yeah, I really do like the friendship between Akkey and Fiendle as well, especially in this new turn in BotGD 2, where he realizes that he's on a reincarnation cycle that is not typical of the others. And it once again puts forward that whole thing where wherever Akkey doesn't find a lover, it seems as though she finds a friend. And I think that's pretty cool, because a lot of times in real life when someone doesn't find a lover, they find an enemy instead. And so it's... Huh?
Or like they're alone and sad.
Yeah. Well, there's another character relationship I want to touch on as well, and it goes into your URL name, Akkey, Agent of Helheim. So, Akkey and her boss.
That one goes through a lot of stuff.
That one has so many stages, because I don't remember how much of a spring I put on you with that one. I don't really recall, so maybe you know better than I, of whether or not that was a, hey, what do you think of this? And how much of it was Hel coming in there, snapping her fingers in a Z pattern and going, hey, this is how things are now.
I think, wait, let me try to remember. It was a thread of Hel coming in and being like, I'll give you more power and being able to. Oh, I remember. Okay, yeah. So she was new. She just recently found out about her Nyx powers.
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't control it, right?
Right.
Yeah, she couldn't control it. So Hel comes in. Yeah. So, because she couldn't control it, Hel comes in and offers her that be able to become more powerful, be able to control it better, etc., etc. That's why she got suddenly so powerful in like 3 and 4 and all that. In exchange for the entire agent business for Ragnarok, and I remember it just got thrown in the thread, and as per true in terms of story writing, I took it and ran with it.
And I think Hel, now that I'm thinking about that thread, I think Hel also offered to protect Akkey's newfound family as well.
That one as well, yeah. She was going to protect. Yeah, right. She was going to protect Maya and Hitch because Akkey was very family driven at that time. You feel it?
Akkey was very family what?
Driven.
Oh yes. And I think it's interesting because as I was going back through old stuff and kind of like seeing both the written and unwritten motivations behind these characters, one of the reasons Hell was so pushy to get Akkey in as a position of an agent is essentially because she was kind of mad and semi-fired Pitch. Yes, so some of this is grain of salt stuff. Nothing about Hell pre-Ragnarok was clean cut. Because as much as she was trying to be a good god, she was also a desperate god with a very bad attitude because she was stressed out and desperate. So you get this situation where she gets Pitch as the agent, which is clearly set up later after I make Hell a muse, because Pitch had his Soul had her own, backstory for Pitch and everything, and it happened to coincide. But one of the things that Hell found herself kind of pissed about, and this was when she was still more trying to be personally connected with humans, was that Pitch had left his family for so long. He went all in with his agent duties, and yet neglected his family because of it, even after a tragedy. So that was kind of like the first level of pissed. And then when Akkey loses her memories, after he botches the job to try to get Haddock's soul, he then just assumes that Haddock is going to do the smart thing, and leaves, and then Haddock, completely caught up in everything, also leaves, which, causes Akkey to wander with no memories in the wilderness to get caught by Hemlock. Now after that, Hell goes from normal pissed to advanced pissed. So she doesn't necessarily fire Pitch in the sense of you can't do this anymore and I'm taking this out or the other thing, but she stops working with him. She just immediately, not immediately, but after careful consideration, she basically cuts communication with him because I don't think they interact at all after season 1. And she jumps to Akkey instead. So I always, kind of wanted to make sure you had that backstory, because that's one of, at least for me, it was a very interesting driving force behind Hell and her choices, and how, it reflects what she was doing in the rough cut stuff that she was doing in season 1, and how very different it is how she is in season 5, which is a much more step back and let them live approach.
Interesting.
So now you know that.
No, I know.
But what are your...
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it. No, I like it.
So what are like the...
I like it.
So if you would, just so that we can enjoy the memory, kind of walk me through, because there's so many layers when she first starts to where they are now, and it's definitely a strange, layered, and complicated relationship. But what would be Hell and Akkey in a nutshell, would you say?
I read this somewhere. Oh, you wrote it for Blood Grudging Friend. I think you can also apply that to this one.
A begrudging boss.
Begrudging boss and employee kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where she didn't like it in the beginning, right?
Right.
She felt like she was forced into it, but she also felt like this was the best option to take in that moment. To have the power to protect everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And I remember all those threads of her self-reflection and the threads with Blunt and with the tree and all that, just kind of beating herself up over it, and I killed all those people, I took their souls without asking them kind of thing.
Right.
And all that, right? And then after, or years after, or coming into terms with it, that it's not as black and white as she's saying, it's all this gray area and all that, and it just developed some sort of begrudging affection. That is fine.
Begrudging affection, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They won't admit it, but it's there.
And I think Hell likes her for that. She's like, haha, She doesn't necessarily have to say something, but she's fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
So I also want to take the time to go over stuff like Vox and Akkey's relationship because of the whole thing of Akkey liking Vox in season 1 and having that completely blow up, and that causing the strain between her and Tree, and the relationship that follows there, and then also her relationship with Stonegit, which the more I reread the series, I realize just how many times that stupid kid tried to kill Akkey.
Uh-huh.
and how absolutely horrible it was how he got away with it and how ill-addressed it was across the entire series.
Yeah.
But I want there to be a good amount of time for that, and we're just about the hour mark. So what I want to do is go through the last quick questions and then pin those 3 points, Tree, Vox, Stonegit, and even Warden, because I think I saw some artwork of like Warden and Akkey sitting back to back. I'm very curious.
Those are really nice.
So I wanted to go through those. And actually, one of the questions I wrote down was, how does Akkey feel about her job as Hell's agent between when she started and now? And I think we went over that pretty well. So just as a last two wrap up, firstly, was Akkey recovering her family part of your plan the whole time, or were they gonna be dead?
Oh, they were gonna be dead, and then we started playing with God.
Right.
So, yeah, started playing with God. So I was like, I don't know where it came from, but at some point I was like, hey, this is an opportunity for the family to come back either as a happy reunion or as a sad reunion. So that, and then I started working it in.
Because last I remember when I was reading in the early stages, her family was left extra crispy. Her mom and her two sisters?
Mom, sister, dad.
Mom, sister, dad. Now, obviously we know that Pitch was not actually there. And her mom was actually extra crispy, was it?
Yes.
So it's her sister is the one who survived.
Yes. Because of Hunter's brother.
Gotcha, and that's where he came into the mix. Okay. You think in 5 years I would have, learned the background to that? But,
He was supposed to be dead along with, but like I said, things changed.
Things changed.
Like, okay, I want to bring her back, and now I want the healer, which is her, so there they go. They come in the package.
Yes, and I thought that was very fitting because, for everything that Akkey goes through, the biggest consolation is that at the end of the series, she gets back the family that she thought that she had lost. It wasn't perfect. There was still a lot of heartache because she still lost her mom and her dad is still always running around. But she gets that family back. And I thought that was right. And then more because of the family she makes along the way. So the last thing was, what was your biggest, as an IRL person, what was your biggest learning experience because of Battle of the Grounded Dungeon?
Learning experience? To me, it was never a situation where I was trying to improve on it, I guess. It was really just a point where I could just have fun, be bad or good at stuff that I was doing. But I guess at the end of it, my art came out better than I was in.
I'm taking it from the angle of life lesson.
Oh, yeah.
That was a reassuring response. That's valid.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to think about it because guess don't do what Akkey's been doing.
Oh, man.
But yeah, just like I said, like to me, I tried to keep it as not as serious as the plot line is, and as dramatic and as sad as everything I've been writing is. I've personally just kind of been having fun with it, right?
Yeah.
So, not that.
Well, I should probably take a page out of your book, because that's a good point. Because I think one of the only reasons I found out so much about myself because of this story was because there were times I took it way too seriously and revealed aspects of my personality and thought process and everything like that through a fictional character, only to look back and realize, oof, I was really wrong about that. Or I didn't realize a perspective that I should have had. So that is, and I think there were a few people who were like that, probably not as severe of case where everyone found out a little bit more about themselves, and so it's actually pretty refreshing having someone who really was there for fun and was able to maintain that without getting sucked down a rabbit hole and getting lost in the line between fiction and reality.
I mean, I guess in a sense that you could argue that has happened to me, but it's more of just reaffirming what I already knew.
That's nice.
Yeah. So like in the beginning, like I would write some stuff that Akkey would like I'd reply a thread, and in my head I would be like, I'm not gonna do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I already knew that, right? I already knew that, so I guess it just confirms it.
And that's a really good thing. I like that. Well, I think that brings us to a close of at least one episode of In the Dungeon with Akkey. We may be having an episode 2, it all depends. Like I said, Vox, Tree, Stonegit, and the Warden are all character dynamics I'd like to discuss, if you're up for it. But in the time being, I appreciate you cutting some quarantine time aside for me to do this podcast. And I hope we get chances to do more threading for a Battle of the Grounded Dungeon 2, as we have been doing for, wow, has it been like half a year at this point?
Didn't we start in June?
Yeah, June.
Yeah.
June, July, August, September, October, November, December.
More than half a year,
January.
bro.
Holy moly. Dang.
Yeah.
We haven't even taken any hiatuses.
We did at one point, no?
It
was like a week hiatus, a couple weeks.
That counts? I'm used to like 4-week hiatuses just so that people could catch up on schoolwork so no one misses out on plots. Yeah, and I know there was one time it was really quiet because we had gotten the raid done. The raid was started but not done, and we decided to just kind of summarize it. Either way, that's getting off topic for totally different discussions. So, true to form, there's no end to this podcast. It would be silly for anyone to think I'd have a proper send-off, so this is how it's ending right here. Thank you again, Akkey.